Welcome back to the Tundra, episode 37, presented by Nicolet Law. He's John Kuhn, Packers legend. I'm Matt Schneidman of The Athletic. John, we're in the heart of OTAs, but that's not where we're going to start today because as I flip my pen, there was some alarming and a little disturbing news. I shouldn't say a little disturbing news coming out of the Hobart Lawrence Police Department last week. We'll get right into it. And keep in mind, this case is still open, and I want to emphasize that. This is all alleged at this point, but Packers star running back Josh Jacobs arrested and charged with 5 things relating to domestic abuse. He is no longer in jail. He did spend a little less than a day in jail, but what was your initial reaction to this? And it is kind of a, I don't want to say tricky, but the Packers are in kind of a no comment mode as this legal process plays out. And I know people want answers and they want a resolution, but things like this that have to go through the legal system don't just happen with the snap of a finger.
Yeah, I mean, my first impressions, you ask, I'll tell you, Josh Jacobs is a beloved figure in that locker room at Lambeau Field. And he's a guy that when you talk with coaches, they will make reference to, he's the heartbeat of the offense. Even though Jordan Love is the leader that he is, you know, Josh Jacobs is kind of the driving force behind the practice habits, the pace at which these guys go out there and learn from and practice with, and it's just an innate ability in him to be able to be that kind of resonating force that brings people along with him and his enthusiasm for the game. And you know, I was talking with a coach earlier this spring about, you know, players on the team and just who just loves football. And Josh was one of those guys who just loves the game of football. Obviously, there's a lot of reasons to play in the NFL, but I think the one that you can really separate yourself as a player as is having that true love and passion for the game. And Josh Jacobs is one of them. So when you hear news like this, when you hear the words domestic violence being used in the same sentence with any player's name, it is alarming, it's concerning. But when it's a player like Josh Jacobs, and speaking just for the impact it has on this Packers team, this Packers locker room, it's massive.
Yeah, and obviously everyone has heard the details by now, or the alleged details, I should say. We recorded last Tuesday morning. This happened last Tuesday evening. Packers had an OTA. But if you don't know what happened, the Hobart Lawrence Police Department here in Green Bay was called to a disturbance, not this past Saturday, but 2 Saturdays ago, May 23rd. Investigated for a couple days, arrested Josh that following Tuesday, charged him with battery, criminal damage to property, disorderly conduct, strangulation and suffocation, and intimidation of a victim. He was jailed and kept in Brown County Jail for, 16 hours. You'd have to fact check me on that. But then he was scheduled to appear in court last Wednesday in order to get released, but he never appeared in court because the Brown County District Attorney's Office comes out and says there is insufficient available evidence to proceed with criminal charges. And I think this is a learning experience for everybody, myself included, because in my 7 years covering the Packers here, John, you've obviously been here a lot longer than I have. There haven't really been many off the field conundrums. I mean, the only one that I can really think of in my time here is ZaDarius Smith getting busted for having weed in his car, driving down to Chicago and back with some teammates. I think Kingsley Keke was in that car and some others. But what the DA's office said is, a police officer in a police department is legally allowed to arrest someone based on probable cause. And the Hobart Lawrence police had probable cause to arrest Jacobs. The DA's office holds itself is kind of a loose term there, but they use a higher standard to pursue criminal charges, and they have to operate under the notion that a crime is, provable beyond a reasonable doubt. Reasonable doubt's the key phrase there, and they couldn't do that yet. So I want to emphasize, this case is not over. They just requested additional investigation because they said in their press release last week they have reason to believe that there may be more information out there that could affect whether they press charges ultimately from a criminal perspective or what criminal charges they do press. So when is that going to happen? I don't know. I don't think anyone knows.
I think it's important to note that there's going to be several investigations going on simultaneously when you talk about the Brown County, when you talk about the NFL, and when you talk about the Green Bay Packers, because without a doubt, it has already come out. There were multiple phone calls into 911. They've been released. You've heard those, and so an incident happened. What was the severity of that incident? What are the details of that incident? Is there more than just he said, she said? Are there photos? Is there sound? Is there recordings? Is there anything to that nature that can be unearthed and uncovered that could impact the judgment of Josh Jacobs, whether it's criminally within the court systems or whether it's with the NFL and the Green Bay Packers? And I think it's going to be the severity of the information that they find out from those, or maybe even conversely, the lack of severe evidence that is against Josh Jacobs that will determine his future. But the NFL is not afraid to impose punishment on a player, even if they are not charged criminally. Let's just point that out right there. If there's something that a player does, if they have evidence of a player doing wrong, especially in the domestic violence realm, they can impose a suspension. Josh Jacobs could be put on a commissioner's exempt list. There's all kinds of ways that the NFL can go about this. Additionally, the Green Bay Packers can hold themselves to a certain standard and punish Josh Jacobs themselves, or decide even to part ways if what they find is egregious enough. But it's important to note, investigations are going on. Everybody is looking for the details of exactly what happened here. And until they know exactly what those details are, nothing is going to happen. We're going to be sitting in limbo.
Yeah, I think it's a good point that you point out that it's not just, okay, he's cleared criminally. Like, I look back to when the Packers signed Brandon McManus, and he obviously had the sexual misconduct allegations from the plane ride while he was with the Jacksonville Jaguars. He did not face any criminal repercussions from that, but the Packers still had to do their own investigation into that before they signed him. And the day after they signed him, Brian Gutekunst stepped in front of reporters in the middle of the season for an impromptu press conference, basically saying we did our due diligence and talked to Brandon. I if I remember correctly, he said, like, we are going with what the NFL did, and the NFL did their investigation. So it is important to note that there are multiple investigations that are probably going on right now. I will be interested to see if Josh is at practice tomorrow. I mean, I'm in Lambeau Field right now at noon on Monday. They're probably here. I don't know if he's here. We only get to see one practice per week during OTAs. He obviously was not at last week's practice because he was in the process of being released from jail. This week, our availability this week, to my understanding, is tomorrow, so Tuesday when you're listening to this. So we'll see if he's there. But I don't want to go into the territory yet, John, of saying, well, what if they release him? What are the Packers going to do next? Because I think that's unfair to the situation because we just don't know how it's going to play out. And regardless of who your instinct to believe is, we on the outside don't know for a fact what actually happened. There are two people who know for a fact what actually happened. It's Josh and the alleged victim. So we'll see how this plays out. Obviously, major implications for the Packers.
Well, Matt, hold on a second.
Yeah.
You said you're not ready to go that way. Brian Gutekunst better be going that way. He better be
putting in the contingency plan. You're saying?
He better be already looking at, and I'd be surprised if there aren't players making their way to Green Bay within the near future, whether it's this week, next week, the following weeks, over the summer weeks before we get here for training camp. And some of the street free agents that are still out there, some names, granted there's miles on their tires, but you gotta check and see what's available if it comes to that point. So we might not be talking about it, but doesn't mean the Green Bay Packers aren't preparing for it. And the way that they prepare for these things is very detailed and in very great length. So this is something that was not on their radar. Obviously, you feel good about Josh Jacobs being your starting running back coming into this season. This sheds a different light on it. Might not be the case if something goes the wrong way. Marshawn Lloyd, Chris Brooks, among others on the rest of that roster. And now what looked like, okay, well, we at least got Josh Jacobs holding down the fort. You got to prepare for if that is not the case. And it might not even be through a decision that you get to make yourself. the last thing I think you need to point out here, Matt, is not all players and coaches are created equal. And what I mean by that is when Urban Meyer was dismissed from his job down in Jacksonville because of some unsavory videos that came out about him, his team was in the middle of a losing streak, right? His team was not performing on the field. Mike Vrabel and Diana Rossini get the same, kind of look, the same kind of situation here as far as optics go this past offseason. The difference, Mike Vrabel just went to a Super Bowl with a young quarterback in the New England Patriots, so he's still working as the head coach of the New England Patriots. Josh Jacobs is who the Packers would like to start the season on the field if the evidence does not prove otherwise.
Yeah, I think the Urban Meyer thing was that he kicked one of his kickers. I thought that's why he got fired. But I think those situations are what they were, and I don't want to compare situations, but these are very, very serious allegations. And I don't think it's fair to compare this situation to the others. Obviously, I think the only thing that's fair to do right now is wait for the law enforcement officials and the DA's office and the Packers and the league to conclude their investigations, because it would be irresponsible of us to come on here and say they should cut him or he did. We don't know what happened.
Well, the reason I brought that up, Matt, is because if this wasn't Josh Jacobs, if this was a fringe back-end guy that just was signed, like a rookie free agent that was just signed, if it was maybe a player that had not been of Josh Jacobs' stature, he might already be gone. The Packers might have already decided to release him, but they're going to let this situation play itself out because of the importance, not just Josh Jacobs, the player, but Josh Jacobs, the person, and what he was in that locker room before these allegations came up.
And one more thing real quick that I want to touch on, because I know this got some pushback on social media, and I'm not trying to stick up for the Packers public relations staff here, but Matt LaFleur and the Packers PR staff caught some flack for how they handled their response to this at LaFleur's press conference last Wednesday, when LaFleur basically came out and before he was asked any questions said, I know there's going to be questions about Josh. I'm going to stick to the team statement, which was we're aware of the allegations basically. And they said we're going to withhold further comment as it's an ongoing investigation. And I saw comments online of them wanting LaFleur to basically answer stuff and say they're disturbing allegations. Well, at the end of the day, if LaFleur goes out there and speaks ill of Jacobs and then he is not charged at all, what message does that send to Jacobs and the rest of the locker room about having your guys back? On the other side of that, if LaFleur comes out and says and defends Jacobs, and then it comes out that he's guilty, that's probably an even worse look. So I think the only possible way you can address it if you're Matt LaFleur is just no comment it, because John, like I said, these are very serious allegations, and if you choose to address it either way, you get into some real murky waters. And maybe some people were displeased with that, but I think the only appropriate and fair way to address this until we know more from law enforcement is to just go right down the middle and say, let's wait to see what comes out.
I agree with you. I think it's also safe to say that Matt LaFleur would condemn any one of the allegations that came out against Josh Jacobs.
If they're proven.
But at the same time, when you're talking about big-time news, big-time player, big-time team, the only way to approach this situation is to let it play itself out, and you can always give your opinion or your reasoning or everything, the decisions that the organization makes at a later time when those decisions are actually made.
Yeah, and Josh's lawyers have come out and said he basically I think the word they used was vehemently denies the allegations. We remain confident that once all of the evidence is gathered and evaluated, it will confirm that no charges should be brought against Josh. So we'll see how it plays out. The Packers canceled player availability last week in the wake of this. We'll see if we're allowed to talk to the players tomorrow. I want to talk to Tyrod Taylor. I want to talk to Zaire Franklin. I want to talk to these other guys.
Well, let me ask you, Matt,
the players are just going to no comment about Josh anyway.
But as a reporter, I feel like at some point in time, you will have to break the seal of silence with the locker room, and they're going to have to no comment the question. Even if they're giving no comment, you're going to have to ask, how do you feel about the locker room with Josh Jacobs, without Josh Jacobs, you're going to ask those questions eventually. So I would assume that player availability would come this week. Maybe not. But if you do, are you planning to ask a question about this?
I mean, am I writing a story specifically about the locker room's response to this? No, because I think, I know, not for a fact, but I figure that the players have been coached up to just no comment it. So I figure, what's the point in asking if they're just going to no comment it? I think the better approach when I would ask the question is when the case has been resolved and the cops come out with their final ruling, or the DA's office, to then go in and say, does how this all played out change how you view Josh? Does it change how you view him as a leader? And that question would probably be more applicable if he's proven guilty, but he stays on the team, which I don't even want to get into what the Packers would do, because I don't know what they would do if he's proven guilty on any of these charges. I don't know for a fact what Brian Gutekunst would do. So yes, the question probably should be asked just because it's the most pressing topic. But as a reporter, they're not going to say anything. So what's the use of it?
Yeah,
you see where I'm coming from?
I do. I look at it a little bit differently. We don't need to play what if game. We don't need to do that. However, I am curious to hear what Marshawn Lloyd thinks right now in his situation and what his role could potentially look like for the Packers.
Sure.
Either way, I would like to hear, what the offensive line thinks about that and how they feel about the other running backs on the team right now. So there's a lot of layers to this and how this impacts the team. And right now it's just kind of a dark cloud looming over everything right now, when the offseason should be a time of great excitement and great anticipation of the season.
John, we have some breaking news, not regarding the Packers. Ready? From Ian Rappaport. The Cleveland Browns are finalizing a trade of Defensive Player of the Year Myles Garrett to the Los Angeles Rams.
Wow.
For Jared Verse, a first-round pick, and more.
Wow, how big
They're not
did they
messing
go?
around.
How big did they go here? Wow,
Woo-wee.
that's a big time move there for the Rams. I did like Jared Verse a lot. Obviously, you get Myles Garrett. That's a whole different ball game there, and that shakes up the landscape in the NFC big time.
That does. They're pushing it all in, all their chips in the middle for a Super Bowl in Matthew Stafford's maybe last year. I don't know. So I would imagine this puts the Rams right up there in terms of Super Bowl favorites. Man, that's a crazy one. I did not think Myles Garrett was...
game now?
The Thanksgiving Eve game.
Oof, I'm already looking at that like, oh no.
Netflix is happy about that one. Okay, so Jared Verse, a 2027 first-round pick and other draft pick compensation. So that's a massive, massive trade that changes the landscape of the NFC. That absolutely has to do with the Packers, because you would put a healthy Packers team. I know we were about to get to a break, but we might as well discuss this and how it impacts the Packers. It absolutely changes, I think, the landscape of the NFC, because as I was saying, a healthy Packers team is right up there, I think, with the Seahawks and the Rams. And if you want to throw the 49ers and maybe the Bears up there as contenders in the NFC, the Lions, I mean, the Eagles, there are a bunch of teams. And the Rams maybe needed one more piece to get over the hump after losing to the Seahawks in the playoffs last year. And they have the best defensive player, perhaps the best player in the NFL, to add to a team with Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua, the reigning NFL MVP. So this just made that road for the Packers that much more hard. But a healthy Micah Parsons, I think, will have something to say about that as he tries to win the DPOY this year.
I look at it and I think, wow, this is almost so eerily similar to the Packers move last year for Micah Parsons.
Oh, yeah.
Have to get over the hump, have to win the division. You talk about the Rams and how good they were last year. Well, guess what? The world champions, they're in their division. They didn't win their division last year. They got to win their division and get to the playoffs. And in order to do that, you need to beef it up. They did that with Myles Garrett.
How about that for a nice Monday in June? And we're probably going to get an A.J. Brown trade here soon to the New England Patriots. All right, more Packers stuff to talk about. John, I was a little perplexed by how Matt LaFleur answered a question about releasing Brandon McManus last week. We'll get into that and a little bit more after the break. You're listening to The Tundra.
Hey guys, John Kuhn here, and this episode of the Tundra podcast is sponsored by Nicolet Law. In football, we get instant replays with crystal clear visuals and slow motion breakdowns from every single angle. Unfortunately, after an accident, you don't get any of that. Most people wish they could show the insurance companies an instant replay though. That's where Nicolet Law comes in. Their attorneys dig into every single detail and track down all the evidence that they can, building the closest thing in real life to an instant replay. When life hits you harder than a defensive lineman, you deserve a team that's ready to hit back. Nicolet Law helps injured Wisconsinites get back into the game. Call 1-855-NICOLET or go to nicoletlaw.com.
Welcome back to the Tundra, episode 37, presented by Nicolet Law. John, one of the Packers' bigger moves of the offseason, I would say, as we just got done discussing what will be the biggest move of the NFL offseason in the Myles Garrett trade, was maybe not as much of a blockbuster move, but cutting Brandon McManus. And what struck me was not that they cut him, it was when they cut him. Because the Packers preach competition. After they drafted Trey Smack, they said, we want competition at kicker. Gutey, going back to the combine, said, we want competition for that room. And then they cut him before the competition even starts. And I understand that Gutey and Matt are not legally obligated to tell the truth at the podium, but this one just confused me a little bit. And I wanted to get your thoughts on just the timing of it. I know we've briefly discussed it before I get into Matt LaFleur's comments about the move made it even more perplexing last week.
So this is very interesting. I thought it was interesting as well, the timing of it. We argued whether there would be a competition or not in camp, regardless of if Brandon McManus was there. To me, this speaks of they had a sit-down conversation with Brandon McManus after the draft, probably brought to them by Brandon McManus, who wants to continue to kick in the NFL, in which case he says, hey, am I going to have a true shot to win this job? Because if not, please just cut me so I can go compete on another team for a chance to win a job. Nobody wants to get cut at the end of training camp, because more times than not, when you're cut at the end of training camp, you have to wait weeks, months, maybe even a year until you get another opportunity to try to earn one of those jobs on one of these 32 teams. And at kicker, you know how fickle that can be. So for me, I like to believe that McManus came to the Packers, asked about the competition. The Packers discussed it with them, and he said, well, would you release me so I have a better opportunity to make my earnings, to make another year in this league somewhere else? And the Packers obliged. That's the only thing that truly makes sense to me in this manner.
So you're not saying, for a fact he asked for his release? Because
I have no idea.
Okay.
I didn't talk to Gutey. I didn't talk to Matt. I didn't talk to the new special teams coordinator. I didn't talk to Rich Bisaccia. I haven't talked to anybody about this, but that's what it reeks to me is, hey, there's truly not going to be that competition, or this kid's going to have to fall flat on his face for you to stay here for another year. We will let you go compete somewhere else, because I believe deep down inside, the Packers always try to do what the best interest is, even though one would say, why not just keep him around? Who cares if he wants to be let go? Keep him around, let them compete, and let the chips fall where they may. I believe this is probably the scenario.
That would make the most sense, because from a Packers perspective, wanting that competition and then being like, no, we don't. I mean, I've seen Gutey lie before, basically, or speak in very small truths. Like when he said he absolutely expected Aaron Jones to be back, and then, as I reported with Diana at the time, he basically asked Aaron Jones to take a 50% pay cut. How do you absolutely expect a guy to be back and then ask him to take a 50% pay cut? He's not going to do that. And then there was one, with Rashawn Gary this offseason at the Combine, Gutey basically spoke in a hypothetical, like if he's on the team. I forget the exact wording he used. So you could kind of tell that he was on his way out. But my point is, sometimes we try to read between the lines of what Gutey says, and sometimes it's not true, sometimes it is. This one seemed like they truly wanted McManus. And Matt LaFleur, to your point, was asked straight up last week, did McManus ask to be released? And he just completely avoided answering that question. And because there were a couple questions asked in one there, as I'm reading the transcript here, did McManus ask to be released? What is the upside to not having him compete? And LaFleur's answer was, I think we were just trying to put Trey in the best position possible moving forward, and he's going to get the bulk of it. I asked LaFleur earlier in the press conference why they got rid of McManus, and he said, I think Gutey and I talked quite a bit, and I think it was only fair to Brandon and our football team to make the move now. So maybe he asked for his release, but that part of the explanation, knowing it might not be complete truth, of we wanted to put Trey in the best position, that makes no sense. Because to bring out the best in him, wouldn't you want him competing against a veteran?
Yes, but it does make sense on this side. If you are truly doing a competition, then they're getting the same number of reps, they're getting the same opportunities, they're getting put in the same game situations. And I don't think you want to do that with a kicker that you want to really expose to the NFL as much as possible early on. You don't want to divide his important reps in half. If it were a true competition, but Brandon McManus was the lead man, I could see Brandon McManus getting some reps, but Trey Smack getting the king's ransom of the reps because, quite frankly, you need to give him the opportunity to beat the incumbent. With this being probably the reverse, probably Trey Smack being the lead horse in their eyes, they thought, well, we're not even going to give McManus that shot to compete here. Let's go ahead and break it because this kid's going to get a boatload of kicks. He's going to get a boatload of opportunities. He's young. His leg can handle it. And they need to know because kicker has been a spot, even in seasons that they've had good kicking, that's been a spot that in the postseason has let them down.
You know, John, you have forgotten more football than I'll ever know. You know more about the Packers than I will ever know. And you've been right about way more things on this podcast than I have. So I want to preface what I'm about to say with that. But what? Why are you smirking?
Yeah, they drafted the kid to be the lead man.
We did have a conversation, and
there was no competition.
You thought it was a completely split 50-50 battle. And if anything, this says Brandon McManus knew, the Packers knew, that Trey Smack was going to be the kicker. And as I said, it would have taken his right leg exploding for him to lose the job.
Color me gullible then, because I came in here and took Gutey and Matt at their word that they were going to knock down, drag out this thing to find themselves the best kicker available. No, that's why I put this kicker as one of my top 3 positions under pressure because...
But is he under pressure? He has no competition now.
That's when it gets even bigger, when you're anointed without the actual earning it. Now, he's earned it by his name and everything that he's done coming out, but now he's got to earn it after already being anointing. That to me, that's more pressure building. I liked being the underdog. I liked being undrafted. Nobody ever saw me coming. I could just work my tail off and get in the good graces of the coaches and slowly work my way up. When you start at the top, you have to prove it from day one.
I can buy into that there might be more pressure now because I think I would say there's more pressure on Gutey and LaFleur than there is Trey Smack
but they've been there and they've done it before. So this is Matt's 8th year in the NFL. This is Gutey's 9th year.
No,
as the GM.
I'm saying
Matt's 8th year as a head coach. Gutey's 9th year as a GM.
I'm saying pressure on them directly relating to this decision. I'm not talking about overall. I'm saying if you're looking at the kicker, situation as a whole, I would say there's more pressure on Gutey and Matt and Cam Acord than Trey. Trey Smack's like, I'm a rookie. Like, what do you expect from me? The pressure, I think, is more on Gutey's decision to be proven right, because now it's like, okay, if the rookie doesn't perform, then you at least had McManus, who was reliable in the regular season from manageable distances. Now it's like, if Trey Smack doesn't perform, what do you do? Sure, there are kickers out there like Daniel Carlson.
Pick McManus up if he's on the street.
Yeah, right. So
then
I personally think in this situation, there's more pressure on like Gutey for Trey Smack to be like, okay, your decision was correct, because now there's no safety valve. And all due respect,
Lucas Haversick has the franchise record. Put some respect on that 61-yard leg, okay?
I was just going to say we're forgetting about the former soon-to-be substitute teacher who went in there and kicked that franchise record-long field goal and then had some trouble with the wind at MetLife, but I think everyone did that day. So there is technically still a competition.
But there's also that break glass in case of emergency player there.
Sure. I just
if
think
it turns out to be an emergency, but I don't think they're envisioning an emergency. I envision them giving him as much opportunity during camp to get ready, as much opportunity in the preseason games to get ready, and throwing him out there week one with high expectations in him. And that is where I believe the pressure comes from. Pressure on Gutey and Matt to be right. Yeah, but they've made bigger decisions in the past, like Jordan Love when you have Aaron Rodgers. You think they're scared of this one? No.
Well, maybe because the kicker situation in the playoffs has kind of hurt them in each of their last three playoff appearances.
That's great. They got 18 weeks of a regular season to not have to worry before they worry for the first time in a wild card or a divisional round.
I just think more than anything, John, the lesson in this is don't take Mason Crosby for granted. Don't take a reliable, maybe not the best kicker in the league, but don't take a reliable kicker for granted once you get him, because the Packers still haven't found that long-term replacement after going through Anders Carlson, Braden Arvison, Greg Joseph, a bunch of other names that they just had in for tryouts or, camp trials.
Are you making the assumption that the Packers took Mason Crosby for granted? He kicked here for 16 years.
I'm not talking about the Packers. I'm talking about the general public. Like, yes, he had, his struggles. They stuck with him through some of those struggles and he made it out on the other side better. I'm just saying kicker can maybe be an overlooked position in the NFL. Once you get one, don't undervalue how important that is, because the Packers have now seen the other side of that. The decision to move on from Mason was the correct decision. I'm sure he would even say that. But finding a great kicker, a reliable kicker, isn't always the easiest thing to do. We'll see if Trey Smack can change that here. Okay, John, another new player for the Packers that I want to talk about, and I don't think this is my bias seeping in, is Zaire Franklin. I think he can have a ZaDarius Smith-like impact in year one on this defense. I'll tell you what I mean by that after the break. You're listening to The Tundra. Welcome back to The Tundra, episode 37. John, you know what time it is as we start our third segment. Time to shout out our good friends at Potawatomi Hotel Casino. There's only one entertainment destination that can claim to be the best in the Midwest, and that's Potawatomi Casino Hotel Milwaukee. Seriously, it's got the perfect blend of big city excitement and hometown charm.
You're right about the excitement. You can light it up with thousands of the latest and greatest slot machines. The poker room, it has 8 live games across 15 different tables. It's 24/7 gaming like you have never experienced. And listen, you can become a Potawatomi Rewards member to rack up entries for monthly promotions where cash, free play, and awesome prizes are always up for grabs. And I am the team captain of Potawatomi Sportsbook, so I can tell you just how incredible the space really is. Over 90 self-service kiosks, a food menu, first-class bar, luxury seating, plenty of screens that's panoramic. Listen, it's my favorite sports place. It should be your favorite sports place, and it's sports betting oasis.
Yeah, it is just a luxury destination if you're staying there for a weekend away, if you're going there for a ball game, as I did a couple weeks ago when the Brewers swept the Yankees, if you're going to gamble, if you're going to sports bet, if you're going to watch sports. It is the all-encompassing Vegas of the Midwest. It's better. I've used to say it was the closest thing to a Vegas casino. It's better than a Vegas casino.
And I'll be down there on Tuesday this week with a pretty big announcement. So there you go.
Oh, look at that. Mm-hmm. So today, as people listen to this.
If people were listening on Tuesday, yes, today.
Okay. I teased it before the break. I want to get into one of the newest Packers. And John, it wasn't a bombshell Packers offseason. They didn't have a first-round pick. They didn't make that blockbuster Micah Parsons move that they did on the eve of last season. But the biggest move that they probably did make was acquiring Zaire Franklin, the longtime special teamer, linebacker, team captain from the Colts, for the general, Colby Wooden, their defensive tackle. And as I've said on this podcast before, I go way back with Zaire. I was the student reporter for the Daily Orange student newspaper at Syracuse University when Zaire was one of the best players on the Syracuse football team. He was the year below me at Syracuse. We probably saw each other out at Lucy's at the bar some weekends. But I really do think this could be a
Do you think he remembers seeing you at Lucy's?
No, but we have talked about Lucy's since he came to the Packers. So we both know that we were both there, probably at the same time. I am intrigued to kind of talk to him. We've seen him on a couple different shows, Chris Long's podcast, Jim Rome, some others here. I think he was on with the insiders on NFL Network, but we haven't talked to him in person. I expect that to happen today, so Tuesday. I think, like I said, this could be a ZaDarius Smith type signing. And what I mean by that, John, is someone who in their first year, remember, teammates voted ZaDarius Smith as the only captain of the defense. They didn't have three captains for the defense in 2019. His first year here, his teammates voted him as the only captain of the defense in his first year. I'm not saying, Xavier McKinney or Micah Parsons or whoever has less respect than Zaire. I expect them to have three captains, but he's going to be a guy that's going to come in and I think earn the respect of his teammates. He's already wearing the green dot, Matt LaFleur said, and be that calming, leading presence on this defense. Maybe he doesn't have the production that ZaDarius Smith had in 2019, but I see him having the same kind of role both on and off the field.
Yes, I'll dive into the football in a moment, but I'll start with bringing over a guy who's a team captain. That is invaluable. I remember you talk about ZaDarius Smith, the offseason when they brought Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney over, and I can remember talking to Brian Gutekunst many times and just having him tell me, John, you don't know how big it was that we brought two captains from other teams onto our team. So that is the pedigree that they're bringing over with Zaire Franklin. Now, the football side of things, I really liked Quay Walker as a football player, his speed, his power, his aggressiveness, and I love Edgerrin Cooper. You know that as at the inside linebacker position. But there was moments in time where it felt like it got a little chaotic on the second level for the Packers, and whether that was just not being on the same page, having a little bit of miscommunication, maybe potentially different ways of seeing things. I think Zaire Franklin could be a guy that comes over here with his long what is this, year 9 or year 10 for him?
Year 9. He's been in the league since 2018.
So I think this is a guy that could come over here and with Edgerrin Cooper, slow things down for Coop so that he can just be the cowboy that he is out there and keeping everybody on the same page from the front line to the middle level to the secondary. That'll be a big piece for how good this defense can be going forward. And I expect bigger things out of this linebacker core. Even though I like Quay Walker, with Quay Walker leaving, Zaire Franklin stepping in, I expect bigger production out of those two guys in the inside.
Yeah, and one thing that I think is worth noting is Zaire Franklin was not a first-round pick. He wasn't a second-round pick. He was a seventh-round pick, the number 235 overall selection in 2018. If you last 9 years in the league as a seventh-round pick and as someone who was undrafted and lasted more than that in the league, you know how hard that is. And I think when people ask, does Zaire Franklin still have enough left in the tank? James Boyd, who covers the Colts for us, does a great job. His analysis of Zaire when this trade happened was he was not good against the pass last year. Probably even worse than not good. 2 years ago, he was an all-pro at linebacker. He started his career as a special teamer. Brian Gutekunst has said even before Zaire became became a defensive starter, they were trying to trade for him. And Zaire went on Chris Long's podcast recently and said the Packers have been trying to get him for 6 years now, I think he said. So Packers have been interested in him for a while. But now, at this point in his career, he turns 30 in a month. So on the back end of his career. But if you're asking yourself, does he still have enough left in the tank? Maybe he's not going to be the best in pass coverage, but I think you just got to inherently trust a guy that's been able to do this for almost a decade as a seventh-round pick and recently made an all-pro team. And clearly, to people who know more about football than probably anyone listening to this podcast in the Packers front office, thought he was worth trading away one of their starting defensive tackles. So time will tell whether he does have a full gas tank left, but I wouldn't be so quick to be like, okay, he's washed because the Colts wanted to trade him. Maybe sometimes a change of scenery might help. And John, let me tell you this. You know what's going to free up Zaire Franklin to probably make plays? Having Micah Parsons in front of you.
Yeah, a lot of times the reason for your perceived lack of production or your perceived drop in play has, a direct correlation to a lack of production or a poor play out of the group that you're on. The defense for the Colts last year was not very good, and that, did Zaire Franklin play a part of that? Yes. Or Zaire Franklin was also a victim of that. So I think it's important to note this is a guy that's been on the Packers wish list for quite some time now. 6 years ago, listen, the Packers saw something in him. They saw the potential in him before it actually was a reality. And with that reality reaching its fruition, they lose Quay Walker. They have a spot that they have to fill, and they can fill it with what they know is production in Zaire Franklin. I thought it was a knockout pickup in the offseason. I thought it was one of the better moves that Gutey did, and I think it could be something that takes this defense even to another level.
And what made it even more understandable is they then fill that Colby Wooden departure with Javon Hargrave. We'll see if he can match that production. But getting Micah Parsons back is really what's going to make that defense go. Micah's back. Micah's back in Green Bay, and we won't hear from him at OTAs probably, but he has joined the co-hosting of the former Donald Driver celebrity charity softball game that has been hosted by Jordan Love the last couple of years, also being co-hosted by Micah Parsons. So Friday in Appleton.
Just don't play in it. Nobody playing it. Just everybody stay out of it. Don't go out there and play as little as possible.
They all play in it. They all do the home run derby. I doubt Micah.
I don't want Micah Parsons doing it. I don't want Tucker Kraft doing it. I don't want anybody that isn't 100% doing it. And I want the ones that are playing in the game to just make it a goofy game. Don't go out there. Don't slide. Don't dive. Don't swing too hard. No. You just relax out there.
I think the reason I'm going is A, to talk to Micah, since we haven't talked to him since locker cleanout day, and B, at OTAs, the Packers PR staff has a rule, probably enforced by Matt LaFleur, that we are not allowed to film players who are injured and or rehabbing. So Micah Parsons is here in Green Bay, but we can't film him rehabbing on the side. No such rules exist at the Wisconsin Timber Rattlers Stadium. So if Micah's jogging around on that field, I can film him. So that's another chance to maybe kind of update people on how he's doing. I will say, I saw Drake May had a celebrity softball game yesterday. And speaking of players maybe doing too much, our old friend Romeo Dobbs took an absolute diving headfirst spill over the makeshift outfield fence trying to catch a ball. Matt Rife, the comedian, slid into second base and took out the knees of Ramondre Stevenson, one of the Patriots' top 2 running backs. And it looked like he completely blew out his ACL. So you're right. You got to be careful, because if your season's screwed by a charity softball game, that's not good.
Matt, Clay Matthews, in this exact same charity softball event, took a shot right off the face as he was pitching. Just a line drive straight back to the mound, off his face. I don't remember. Did he break his nose? Did he break his jaw? There was a lot of blood. I don't want any of that.
You got to get an L screen for the guy. You can't just be pitching without anything up there. Anyway, should be a lot of good stuff coming out of Lambeau this week if we get to talk to the players. We'll have plenty to talk about on next week's episode, whether it be what we hear from Micah, what we hear in our first time talking to guys like Zaire Franklin, Tyrod Taylor, Benjamin St. Juste, all those guys as we continue here along with OTAs. We appreciate everyone for listening. He's John. I'm Matt. We'll talk to you next week.